Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this video is going to be part one of a new series that is a little bit different. And listen, I have just gotten tons of requests and questions about like, hey, when you're not reviewing, what gear is yours? Do you just sit down and listen to by choice and for fun? And I will level with you, those times are pretty rare anymore because so much of my listening usually has a new piece that is under review somewhere in the signal chain. So I'm going to sort of answer that original question and then also answer questions like, hey, can you share some thoughts about some of your own gear? Because I have gotten numerous requests, for example, of what's my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 like? What's my Vioelectric HPV 281 like? Things that have been in my system for a long time, going back from before I was ever reviewing, that are discontinued and I've never really reviewed as because of that. So I will kind of wrap all of those questions together in this series where I talk about like what is my stuff that I either listen to for personal enjoyment or I trust to be a foundational piece for reviewing work, because those are really kind of one and the same, I think. And then also, what are my thoughts on some of that gear that will show up in this series that I haven't done full reviews of just because you can't obtain it. But hopefully those thoughts will give you added context as to why I say the things that I do in my reviews. All right, so that's the intro to the series. What I'm going to talk about here in part one to kick this series off is my Berkeley Audio Designs Alpha Series 2 DAC, which I'm not going to hold up at the moment. I will show you a picture of it here in a moment on the other side of Shameless Self-Promotion and talk over that picture. But it's plugged into my system over there. My main rig is over to my left of the filming location here. And it's got a bunch of stuff on top of it. And it's got all kinds of things plugged into it. And I just frankly wasn't going to do the work to take it out of the system, hold it up, put it back in. It also is a DAC that needs a lot of warm-up time, so I didn't want to go through all of that again, but I will show you pictures of it, talk over a little bit, and then on the other side of Shameless Self-Promotion, I will also make a few comments on its sound. So, sound good? Let's do all of that. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. Here is the front panel of the Alpha Series 2. The Alpha Series 2 was initially launched back in about the year 2012, I believe. The unit that you see here that is my unit is a 2017 revision that has MQA rendering in it, which I don't use, but that's just to give you context as to how recent this unit is. It handles PCM decoding up to 32-bit 192 kilohertz. It does not do DSD. So in terms of decoding options, you could argue it's obsolete, but there are other companies out there, such as SHIT, for example, that top out at 24-192 as well. The design is pretty Spartan, just industrial, gets the point across. The guts of this thing are where the price comes from. When it was a brand new unit, it was about $5,500 US, I believe. When a friend sold it to me as I was trying to get this channel and reviewing work up and running, he sold it to me for like pennies on the dollar. So I got a really good deal on this. All right, looking at it left to right, we see 4 input options. They are all SPDIF. We have an AES input, which is basically SPDIF over a balanced XLR connection. We have 2 coaxial SPDIF inputs that are BNC connectors on them, and that's really handy for me as a reviewer to be able to connect 2 DACs via identical coaxial connections, or excuse me, 2 sources into identical coaxial connections to do comparisons on things and that sort of thing. And then there is a Toastlink optical input in there as well. Then we have options for locking the DAC. There's HDCD decoding. There's a phase invert. In the middle, we have a front panel display that will do sampling rate. It will also show the volume level, because if you look to the right there, we can adjust the volume of both channels together and the left and right channels individually. So this is actually a very good preamp as well. If you need it, and you can adjust the levels of the channels individually. Then we have indicators for, like, it'll show the sampling rate. There are digital filters on it, and we cycle through those with the mode button. Then there's a display dimmer. This is a balanced DAC. It has XLR outputs. It has RCA single-ended outputs. I have used both. It sounds really excellent from both. I'm not sure which of the XLR or RCA outs is better. I've never really listened closely for that, and that's because the performance from both of them is just amazing and has been a reference caliber for me. We see the Singxer SU2 DDC on top of it, and that is because there is no USB input on the Alpha here, so a DDC is required to hook up to any source that has a USB output. So that's why I have that. I have reviewed the Singxer SU2, and I will put a link to that review in the description below. All right, to sum up the sound of the Alpha S2, really, it continues to amaze me. It is just spectacular, really. I mean, it was a $5,500 DAC right around circa 2017 when the revision that I have was the most recent model. But it still just sounds amazing. Yes, it tops out at 32-bit 192 kilohertz PCM files. It has the MQA rendering in it, which is not something that I don't need or use. It does not do DSD, that sort of thing. But like when you're playing a PCM file through it, which is like 99% of the listening that I do, it just sounds amazing. The standout traits to me for it sonically are that it is just amazingly resolving. I don't feel like it misses much. Now, I've heard very, very few DACs at its price or beyond. I will get to more of them in time. So I'm sure somewhere out there are more resolving DACs. I just haven't come across them yet. So it continues to impress me in the amount of sheer resolution that it brings out. So when you watch reviews on my channel here of where I talk about like how resolving Susvara is, or Utopia, or even the Shangri-La, okay, or those, you know, LCD5, Abyss 1266, Final D8000 Pro, okay, Stax SRX 9000, like all of these things, these headphones and all that are just really super resolving. That, like, it's the Berkeley Alpha S2 behind the scenes that is bringing a lot of that out, or at least presenting that information to the amplifier and then in turn to the headphones. All right, so that's one standout trait to me. Its sound profile from like a frequency response standpoint is just very, very neutral. I've had a lot of different gear in here. I've heard warm gear, I've heard brighter gear. This one just continues to play it pretty much right down the middle, being pretty neutral. Right, then from a, so put that together, neutral and the resolution, it gets really incisive, right? Like it does a really excellent job of doing vocal separation, like separating individual voices from each other, but then also blending them together believably in harmonies and that sort of thing. Instrument separation, it really pulls out and separates the differences between instruments and all of that. It just, again, does a remarkable job of presenting each sound in its own way, but also making it coherently a part of the presentation. Which is a good segue into its spatial performance, because it is not necessarily an enormous, standout, huge sound stager, but it's rather large in its staging, but it has really tight control of the imaging and the separation within the sound field, really in all three dimensions, okay, and all of that. So when I talk about staging and imaging and separation in a lot of my gear reviews, particularly with the high-end headphones and all of that, it's the Berkeley Alpha Series 2 that is on the front end of that signal, showing me all of that in there. So it does a remarkable job there. I also personally like a very dynamic and lively presentation. Alpha S2 gives me that. It's got a very active, energetic sound to it, with a lot of physicality in the low end and that sort of thing. Like it's got a fun, energetic presentation from a macrodynamic aspect as well. And then I also am a listener who enjoys timbre. I want things to sound as close to real as they can from a tonal standpoint, from a timing standpoint, the attack and the decay and that sort of thing. And to me, the Berkeley Alpha Series 2 does that too. It has really lifelike and excellent timbre to go along with it. So even though it is technically out of date in terms of its decoding options and all of that, even though it does not have a USB input, and so I require either the use of a DDC or a streamer like the iFi Neo Stream, which I reviewed recently and all of that, to feed it the digital signal, I have just not really felt any need to upgrade or replace the Alpha S2. And that's because in the characteristics that I like, I mean, it's got excellent spatial presentations, very holographic with some reasonably good soundstage sizing to it. The resolution is just absolutely phenomenal on it. It's got a fun, lively, energetic, dynamic presentation from like the physicality and the pacing aspects of it and all that. And then the timbre is also very nice and lifelike. All that. Now, with some gear, I don't notice this all of the time, and so it is a little bit sensitive with amp pairings on this one at times too here, but if you match it with an amplifier that leans a little bit brighter than neutral, it can sound a little bit tonally thin, like it's just the sound isn't as fully fleshed out as it could be. So it's not really a thick sounding DAC to begin with, which some people like warmer, thicker sound on their front end too, and I understand that. So if that's what you're looking for, the Berkeley's not for you. But those other aspects that I mentioned to me are just, I have yet to hear a DAC that does all of those things that I look for and that I like in my music, put all of those things together better than this one does. So that's why I trust it, that's why I use it, that's why I like it. And so it has been the workhorse DAC in my system, both for personal listening, enjoyment, and for reviewing work for a while now, and will continue to be because, for one, I'm not really in a financial position to upgrade from it or anything like that. And even if another DAC does come along, it would likely have to have a little bit different sound to it so that I have more signal chain options for reviewing work and that sort of thing. I don't think I would ever straight up replace it anytime soon. Could be famous last words for we audiophiles, but it has stood the test of time in my system so far. I don't see a reason to change from it anytime soon. Okay, so there are some of my thoughts on the Berkeley Alpha Series 2. Many of you have asked about that. So I do have some high-end DAC reviews coming up, like the, is it Lampizitor? Is that how you say that? Anyway, the Amber 3 is on my desk over there. So that will be one comparison point with the Alpha Series 2 coming up in the near future, for example. So anyway, I'm Wave Theory. I will leave it there. Please look forward to future episodes of this series. I do think next up will be my Vio HPA V281. So as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, check out PayPal, Patreon, all of that kind of stuff. And as always, enjoy the music.